some pretty excellent harmonies there. pretty good stuff. Yeah, so as we kind of get into it, um, yeah, just the blessings of God's grace and the peace that He gives, kind of in the middle of unrest and trials, is I think one of the main focuses that I want to work on today. I felt like just going on with our regular scheduled sermon series in the middle of this might be a little bit awkward. So just with everything going on, like I said, you've seen the coverage. The George Floyd arrest. I want to call it that. The coverage of the Ahmaud Arbery shooting by the guys in the truck, that came out earlier this week and last week. You've seen the images, kind of city blocks burning, cars on fire, CNN building being kind of torn apart, police precincts ablaze, etc. Everyone's probably picked a side, and I think that's one of the problems. We pick a side and then become really convicted of our own positions, and we're unable to see things from other points of view. So just to begin, it's not like I'm saying I have all the answers or even that I know the details. I don't know what it's like to be in any of the situations that are going on right now. I don't know what it's like to be a person of color living in a country that has a history of mistreatment, people of color, and what just the images coming out of these different situations, what that kind of the memories or thoughts and history that brings up. I don't know what types of policies need to be enacted or anything like that. I just don't know. That's not the purpose of this message. The purpose I want to look at is to examine who we should be, right? Who we should be with all of this going on around us, to examine ourselves and our views of humanity in light of all of these events. We live in a really polarized society. I think, if you look at different charts that show polarization over the last couple of decades, go back 30 years ago, there was a big middle where people agreed basically on most things. The problem was trying to find the policy solutions were kind of what are on the outside, but there's this big middle of things that we all agree on. And now that middle has kind of separated into two different bell curves rather than one big bell curve. It's just a very polarized society that we live in. It feels like we have to pick a side. Like I said, once we pick a side and become just kind of militant in that, the other side ends up becoming kind of vilified and dehumanized. Once we go down that road, we fix ourselves to one way of seeing and interacting with other humans. And that's I think the major problem. Once we go down that road, we fix ourselves, and it's really hard to get out of that. And that's not the message of the cross, right? That's not the message of Jesus. The message of the cross is universal embrace. And however, we become incapable of a universal embrace when we're tied to an ideology. Right? When we allow ourselves to be kind of possessed by an ideology, we're incapable of embrace, universal embrace. When we're possessed by an ideology, those that we disagree with become an enemy. And further, we view those who don't pick our side as the enemy, even if they want to remain neutral, because they refuse to join our side. There's a book that I do recommend. You can get it. It's called Exclusion and Embrace by Miroslav Volf. He was I want to get this right, Eastern European Bloc, I think Bosnian refugee, during the really, really tough times. He witnessed some horrible atrocities, and he's a Christian theologian, and he just does an excellent job. And one of the things that he says in that book is in all wars, whether large or small, whether carried out on battlefields, city streets, living rooms, or faculty lounges, we come across the same basic exclusionary polarity. It's us against them, their gain, our loss, either us or them. The stronger the conflict, the more the rich texture of the social world disappears, and a stark exclusionary polarity emerges around which all thought and all practice aligns itself. No other choice seems available, no neutrality possible, and therefore no innocence is sustainable. If one does not exit that whole social world, one gets sucked into the horrible polarity. Right? The more we entrench ourselves in one side against the other, the less we're able to see the, like he says, the rich social texture, the rich social background upon which everything is laid. We see things only one way, and any other way becomes the enemy. And I think it's a dangerous place to be. And he witnessed that firsthand, in the Civil War that he went through in his home country. So, question: how do we, as people who should be living between worlds, right? We live between this world and the world to come, right? We live as people who are praying for God's will to be done, right? For his kingdom to come, right? We live between the worlds, between this world and between God's new world that he is creating. How do we, as people who live between the worlds, move forward with just such a polarizing atmosphere? What should our response be? Obviously follow Jesus, right? And, we flesh that out a little bit. He's God, he's fully human, gave himself for a humanity that hated him, betrayed him, murdered him, right? So if anyone was an enemy to anyone, humanity is an enemy to God. And how did he react? He came, right? He sought, he went out to heal, to make peace, and to bring people closer to God. Jesus's mission was pro-human. Because humans are made in the image of God, humans have been given an awesome responsibility, right, to love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and to love the neighbor as yourself. But we fail regularly. We fail because we can't see past ourselves, our ambitions, our desires, our ideologies, right? We fail so often, right? Because we're ungrateful, unthankful, because we repay evil with evil. We fail so much, and Jesus has come to help us to be renewed, be remade, be restored, and to try to see things the way that he does, to look at humanity as in need of restoration, in need of hope, right? In need of God's embrace. So my hope is that we can look past our ideologies, whatever side we may have picked, look past those ideologies, or those that we disagree with, and see that behind those ideologies are humans that are made in God's image and worthy of our love and deserve our embrace. Nobody is beyond that need, and nobody is beyond deserving that, right? Paul was a persecutor of the church, arrested Christians, brought them to death, right? He was wholeheartedly in agreement with the stoning of Stephen. And once he encountered Jesus, was converted, the church gave him the right hand of fellowship, right? They embraced him as their own. Despite what he had done, no one is beyond that. No one is beyond no one is beyond deserving the embrace of God's people. So I want to look at two texts to kind of see through to the humanity behind one another. And the first one is John, Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, and then 14 through 18. So you have that. On my screen, I have Travis, then Juliet. Travis, would you mind reading John 1, 1 through 5?
Sure. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that had been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
Good. Juliet, can you go 14 through 18?
Sure. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God, is the closest in relationship with the Father, has made him known."
Good. Good. What translation is that, Juliet?
Yeah, it's NIV, I think.
Excellent. The new NIV, the 2011.
Sounds like the NLT.
I think it's NIV.
Yeah,
I just had to Google it because my phone's
Yeah.
broken. And
Yeah, no, that's probably the 2011. That's an excellent. I think they
Okay.
nailed that really well. Verse 18 particularly. Yeah, that's very good. Very good. So just really quickly, any observations or comments on the text that we had? Anything that stood out to you in the reading? If not, that's okay, but I like some voices.
So who was John talking to?
You mean the audience that he wrote to?
Yeah.
Hard to say. Probably a good mixture of Gentiles and Jews. The tradition is he wrote to church in Ephesus. That's where the letter originated.
I'm just thinking because when he talks about he who comes after me surpassed me because he was before me. It's like you wouldn't get that probably as a Gentile.
Yeah. A good mixture, and there's a ton in here about that's very rich in Old Testament background, but also Greek philosophy. There's some good cross references as well. Yeah. Anything else that stood out to you in the reading? So it's really cool is you see the Word was with God and the Word was God, right? And then verse 14, the Word became flesh, dwelt among us, right? God, the creator of all, became flesh in the person of Jesus Christ to a people that, as he says, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness has not comprehended it or overcome it. He came to a people that rejected him, that despised him in a lot of ways, that hated him. In spite of all that, in spite of all that was done to him, he gave grace upon grace, right? Grace and truth. In spite of how he was treated, he gave grace upon grace. He didn't surround himself with just those that he disagreed with or that he agreed with, like on political or social matters, right? He chose zealots and tax collectors as his apostles, a zealot and a tax collector. Those, it's like a hardcore libertarian and an IRS agent, right? Those two people he picked to be with each other. It's an interesting group that he chose to be his apostles. Women were part of the people that bankrolled his ministry, which was common at that time. He was very close and gave a lot of honor to women who were not really esteemed well in his time. He healed the servant of a Roman centurion, right? A guy that would not have been really viewed well by many Jews. He healed like a Samaritan, again, couple Samaritans, that those people weren't really esteemed very highly at all, right? His mission was grace and mercy. It wasn't, this is my faction, this is my sectarian group, and I'm just going to, not allow any other viewpoints to be brought in. He surrounded himself with such a variety of viewpoints, just a huge admixture of different kinds of people, different kinds of mentalities and ways of thinking and ideologies. His mission, it was grace and mercy, right? It was to live out God's love in front of humanity. Because of that focus, he's able to see past the ideologies of those people around him and offer them something better than an ideology: freedom, right? Freedom from the constructs of this world, and hope in the God of love who accepted them, forgave them, and made them whole with grace and truth, right? Mercy. Right? It's a different kind of mission, right? He's not trying to just create a new faction. He's trying to create a new humanity that isn't part of any faction, that's independent of factions, right? That can live and exist and flourish in any kind of fashion, in any kind of social political environment. The reason why Christianity can thrive, whether it's in a communist state, whether it's in a capitalist state, whether it's in under a monarch, whether it's in a democracy, there's a reason why Christianity can thrive in any of those states. It's because it's not tied to a particular ideology. It's tied to the renewing of humanity, and that's applicable in any society. And you think about, again, going back to what it took, right? Jesus's his sacrifice, his agony. But again, the agony of Jesus wasn't necessarily the social problems of his day. It's not that people rejected his radical understanding of the human condition and his true needs. His agony was abandonment. Right? That's what caused Jesus' agony. Again, from Miroslav Volf, he says, Jesus' greatest agony was not that he suffered. Suffering can be endured, even embraced, if it brings the desired fruit, as experience of giving birth illustrates, right? That even though giving birth is painful and horrible, and that you have something wonderful that comes out of it. So giving birth illustrates that it's not just suffering. What turned the pain of suffering into agony for Jesus was the abandonment. Jesus was abandoned by the people he trusted, and the people who trusted in him, and by the God whom he trusted. That's why he calls out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The abandonment. And Jesus experienced that abandonment for us, right, on our behalf, not because of our views, but because we are made in God's image, and because we're flawed, and because Jesus' desire to see us made whole. Right? Because there's so much beyond our limited perspectives that Jesus is able to reach down into our lives and accept us regardless of race, gender, intelligence, economic status, political affiliation, whatever it might be. Jesus accepts us because of his self-giving love. Right? Not because of who we are, but because who he is. He accepts us because of his own self-giving love. And I think that that's a major message for how we must operate as Christians. Right? We can accept people and embrace people because we have been remade. We have been shown selfless love. So we're able to give that, right? Regardless of where people might stand in opposition to us and in our views or whatever it might be. Because that is the message of the cross, that the Son of God, who is God, became flesh and endured rejection, humiliation, and suffering in order to make peace with us, to give us grace, to give us mercy, right? To embrace us, because he's done that for us, and because he's filled us with himself. We can extend that to one another and to humanity. Because of what's been done for us, we can reach out in the same way. Before we move on, to the next text. Any comments or questions on this or anything related to it?
It's incredibly comforting and calming right now when times like this, when the world seems so evil, just to think about those characteristics that you brought up about God, and to think that he is in control and he can help me be more, have those characteristics of calm, grace, sort of above it all, a peace. It's such a comforting message.
All right. So then the second is kind of more along the lines of the practical, how we can live this out. Romans 12. Let's go to Romans 12. We'll look at that chapter. I'm going to break it up into two sections and just kind of skim past the middle section of it. The next on my list is Paul. Paul, can you read Romans 12 verses 1 and 2?
Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will.
Good. Yeah, so the chapter starts out with this encouragement to allow our minds to be transformed, right? To be different people, renewed humanity, to be a living sacrifice, right? To live as a sacrifice, to live as an offering to God. And we have the perfect model of what that means in the person of Jesus, right? A loving, someone who spoke the truth, however awkward socially or however discomforting that may have been, to whatever risk that may have taken. He spoke the truth, but he also showed grace, humility, and mercy to everyone. Right? He was just the perfect example of what it means to live as a sacrifice. And that, he says, that's our spiritual worship, or that is our way of life, is to have our minds be remade and to live as a sacrifice. And he says that this world has a pattern, right? Don't be conformed to this world, right? That this world has a way of existing, right? And wants to kind of press you into its mold. Don't let it, right? And one of the major forms of this world is just factionism. And we just form these factions, and we vilify people who disagree with us, and we just can't see past ourselves and can't see past our group, right? And the tighter the group becomes, then the less we allow dissent into that group. So the less we're able to question ourselves. And then that just ends up being this weird loop of self-referential, just dialogue. We don't allow new information. We don't allow ourselves to be changed. Saying that's the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to allow our minds to be continually renewed, transformed by the renewal of your mind. Right? Constantly testing to discern the will of God that is good, acceptable, and perfect. Right? We're not supposed to just be these loops of, that's true because just going around and around in a circle. We're supposed to continually allow the new information into our lives, allow ourselves to grow in testing the will of God, to allow our minds to be continually transformed. So it is through the mercy of God that reformation of humanity is possible. As you read in the first verse, by the mercies of God, present yourselves or your bodies as a living sacrifice, right? It's by the grace of God that that's possible. So in verses 3 through 8, Paul goes through a list of spiritual gifts, which affect the spiritually sacrificial lifestyle. And then Paul gets very practical in verses 9 through following. So we're going to go there. Is Elizabeth still there? You're muted.
9 through 11?
Yeah, read 9 through 13.
Oh, 9 through 13. Okay. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality.
Good. We'll move on to the next section in a second, but kind of this section, it's very, I think, very practical. And the first part of it, let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to that which is good. Evil comes in so many forms, and it's present in every man-made ideology, no matter what your stance, politically or whatever. Socially, there are evil manifestations that pop up into it. In every man-made ideology, there are evils, and as Christians, we are to hate evil in all of its forms. Right? Hate what is evil, regardless of our politics or social groups. We are required to see evil for what it is, regardless of our affiliations. To be able to recognize evil when it's present, regardless of our politics, regardless of our social groups. We're to see evil for what it is. We should be detached enough from society to notice something when it is evil. So on the flip side, we should be lovers of that which is good, right? Love what is good. Hold fast to what is good. So we should be lovers of whatever is good. When we see kindness, goodness in any form, rejoice in that, right? Again, there's no kind of like political system or, that's like fully evil. As much as we want to try to make it, I mean, there might be some, I guess, like, if you're a Satan worshiper, I don't know, but I'm sure there's some ideologies that are wholly evil. I don't know, but I think we should be able to notice what is good, however it might exist, and whatever shape it might take in someone or another group that we disagree with. We should always be able to see good. And so I think the hard part of this is to see evil in our own kind of ideologies, and then to see good in others. Right? We're really good at seeing the good of the things that we believe in, whether socially or politically, and seeing only evil on the other side. I think we really need to work on flipping that, seeing the good in the people that we disagree with, and seeing the evil in our own belief structures and our own political structures. I love the next portion of that text. They outdo one another in showing honor. Right? It's not enough just to kind of give lip service to honor here and there. Paul kind of gives us this encouragement to compete in putting others above ourselves, putting others above our politics, no matter what those politics are, people are more important than our politics. As soon as we start vilifying and dehumanizing people, we've lost our mission. We're completely lost. As soon as we start, seeing only evil and not seeing someone who's made in the image of God, worthy of our love and deserving our embrace, we've lost. We've lost sight of what Jesus came for. We've failed to be renewed in our mind testing that which is good, acceptable, and perfect. In verses 11 through 12, Paul gives these kind of 7 different commands. He says, do not be slothful in zeal, right? Be fervent, be hot for doing good, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. There's 7 different commands, 7 different encouragements that Paul gives. So I thought it would be interesting to throw this one out to the class. Where do you see yourself faltering in those different commands, in those different encouragements here? I think one of them for me, and I'm going to take the easy one here. I'm not constant in prayer like I should be. Sometimes oftentimes I'll just make a decision without praying for it. Someone will share something that's going on in their lives, whether it's great or not so great. And I kind of go into like maybe just counseling mode or whatever. And my first instinct isn't prayer. Pray with that person, pray for that person. I'm not as diligent in that as I know I need to be. Where else do you guys see yourselves in need of, fervency?
Well, I think for me, definitely the first, joyful in hope. Overall, I'm like a very negative person and kind of a pessimist, I think, by nature. And so, like, even when I do have hope, it's kind of that sort of like prepare for the worst anyway, like always kind of be ready, and this too will pass. Like even when good things are happening, it's like, okay, but we better be ready for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. This is like you can never actually like ever relax or enjoy yourself that way.
Good. What's one of the other areas that you see yourself in need of encouragement?
I think that for me, definitely the patient in affliction goes together with never lose your zeal. It's sort of that you can just get discouraged and just sort of want to withdraw and not be, quite as, and just ask the Lord to like take it all away. It's like too quick to, instead of just being patient and maintaining some fervor, it's sort of, I become overwhelmed and just sort of want to withdraw.
Yeah. It's not the only one. Yeah. Good. Where else? Gonna need at least one more before we move on.
I was going to say, Derek, that for me, there's seasons, there's days or months or whatever. I'm just not praying like I could. Or like right now, allergy season, it's hit me hard this year. Bad headaches, plus all the stress of everything going on. That's it. Can I go? Just shut the door, go away.
Right.
Sort of thing. Or hospitality, just because I have a tiny home or maybe not the gifts of others to do doesn't mean I'm need to be, especially when I'm not feeling well or feeling the stress. I just think there's seasons of times. I just go through all of these.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we do really well in some and not the other. I think that's the truth with any of these different lists of positive characteristics or negative characteristics. Like you're saying, we go through seasons of each one. Sometimes we're really great at showing hospitality, and then we go like 6 months not having a single person in our house. It's like, it's So then Paul goes into this theme in verses 14 through following of, it develops this theme of Christian peacemakers. Right? So how do we live and interact with people that we might feel hostile towards, or that we understand as hostile towards us? Right? How do we live in that world where, and no matter what you do, unless you're just a total hermit, you're not going to get away from hostile relationships in your life. There's just going to be hostility. There's going to be, interpersonal problems that arise within our lives. So who are we supposed to be as Christians in the midst of that? So the first portion, verse 14, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. And that first section, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse them. A lot of people cause strife in our life, and whether they're actually persecuting us or that's how we perceive it, I think it still holds true. Maybe especially so when the persecution is merely perceived. Maybe that's really when we need to start giving the blessings out, because that'll start if we just perceive someone as persecuting us, and we allow ourselves to get in a stream of kind of cursing them back or repaying their behavior that we perceive in them back towards them. I mean, relationships quickly deteriorate and get ruined that way. So it's easy to speak ill or to curse those that we have anger towards, or that have anger towards us. This is the opposite of what we see of Jesus on the cross. That is the very opposite thing that we see when we think of Jesus on the cross. Jesus is on the cross. People are cursing him. He calls out and says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." That's how Jesus repays, persecution, is asking for mercy, right? He repays it with blessing. And I think that, if we can adopt that, if someone at work or whatever talking, bad mouthing you or whatever it might be, if we repay that with some form of blessing, some form of, compliment or whatever, I mean, that's it, not just to change them, right? But it changes our perception of them, and it allows us to interact with them differently. If we, like Jesus, absorb hostility when it comes our way, and then repay it with God's, infinite love, I mean, that's a much better society. So speaking ill of those who bring hostility into our lives only makes the problem and humanity worse, right? How we speak about people, the way we repay persecution or hostility done towards us, the way we repay it is so important, not just to change people, but to change ourselves, and so that we can be the people that God wants us to be, so that we can reflect Jesus in our lives. And then the next section, he says, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another, showing honor. Verse 16, live in harmony with one another. Verse 15. Sorry. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Again, there's no real boundary to this one. There are no boundaries, right? Weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. And I think, again, when it comes to people that we disagree with, it's harder for us to see their pain and to weep with them. And I think that, having that sympathy for people that we disagree with, or people who are in a different, who are different than us, I guess I should say, it's exactly what Jesus did, right? There's a reason why Jesus wept over Lazarus's death, even though he knew he was going to raise him from the dead. Jesus weeps at his grave. recognizing the humanity of other people and allowing ourselves to feel their joy and their pain is allowing ourselves to become more like our Lord. Being able to sympathize with our fellow humans is becoming more like our Lord, not less. Being able to feel the pain and the joy of people who are maybe not like us is becoming more like Jesus. So then he moves into live in harmony with one another. Do not be arrogant, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Doesn't mean that we are to have no convictions, right? That we're just supposed to be everything to, that's not what he's saying. It means that there are humans across the spectrum, and we should not be arrogant to expect them to think as we think, to live how we live. We're not told to make clones of ourselves. We're told to live in harmony with those who are different than us. And not be so arrogant as to expect them to think like we think or live how we live. We're supposed to associate with the lowly, right? And that's so subjective. I mean, I could be lowly in someone else's eyes and see them as lowly in my eyes. It's universal, right? So live in harmony, right? Live in a relationship that actually builds one another up in all respects. So live in harmony. Don't be arrogant. Associate with the lowly. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Right? Don't come to a situation thinking you have, or a disagreement or whatever, thinking you have all the answers, and if they just shut up and listen, if they would just shut up and listen, their lives would be better. So you come to each situation or disagreement, it's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to see life from a different perspective. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Associate with the lowly. Don't be arrogant. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. Again, he's saying, don't perpetuate the cycle of mistreatment, right? That is antithetical to the message of the cross. Christ absorbed evil and returned it with grace and mercy. He absorbed all the evil heaped upon himself, and in return gave a blessing, right? Gave mercy, gave grace, gave peace, healing, and wholeness. He absorbs the evil and returns it with grace. This does not mean, and it's not the same as being a doormat, right? Jesus was active, not passive, in his demonstration of honorable treatment to those who have inflicted evil upon him. He was active in it. He actively went out, showed honor to people, healed people, confronted evil where it existed. He was active in that pursuit. People didn't just walk on him. Paul isn't saying just to, let everyone, treating everyone with honor means letting everyone do what they want to do. That's not the case. But Jesus actively goes out and seeks relationships with people, seeks to be in people's lives, show them grace, show them truth, show them mercy, convict them, compel them to be God's people. It was an active mission, not a passive one. So that repaying no one evil for evil, it takes far more courage and conviction than retaliation. Like repaying good when evil is inflicted, it takes so much more courage and conviction than just retaliating. It runs contrary to our nature, which I think is why we need the grace of Christ to empower our lives and our actions. It's contrary to our nature. When someone does something wrong to us, we want to do wrong back to them. We want to, eye for an eye, as people kind of take out of context. But that's our nature, is to repay harm done to us with harm. That's our nature, and he's saying that's not who we're supposed to be. If we perceive a wrong, we need to react with giving people honor. And he says, so live peaceably with all. In the next section, if it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Again, doesn't mean we're supposed to abandon our beliefs and convictions in order to make peace. It means that we have a responsibility, so far as it depends on you, to live in peace with those people in our lives. And there's a lot that depends on you. In any relationship, there's a lot that depends on you. All conflict is two-sided. We can always do more, listen more, forgive more, sympathize, treat other people with more honor. There's always more that we can do. There's always more that I can do. There's always more that you can do. Anytime, like I counsel someone who's in conflict with another person, like a wife or husband, coworker, whatever it is, excluding extreme circumstances, I always ask them what they have done to the other person, what the other person might be harboring against them, whatever. Most of the time, that person can give multiple answers. Here's where I've faltered in the relationship. Here's what I've done wrong. I know I could do this better. All those sorts of things. However, sometimes they'll say, I haven't done anything wrong to my sister or to my wife. I haven't done anything wrong. Take no blame. There's no room for their own wrongdoing. What that means is they refuse to make peace. There's a refusal, and like I said, excluding extreme examples where someone is attacked for no reason. That happens. And I'm not talking about those issues. But it means you're refusing to make peace, right? As far as it depends on them, they will not take action to make things better, to see things from another perspective. The only way forward is to say to that person, ask your brother, your sister, your wife, or whatever, what you have done to make the relationship worse, right? Seek their perspective on it. But all personal conflict, nearly all personal conflict, is two-sided. And if we can't proceed with that to make peace with them, we're not doing, if possible, so as far as it depends on you, to live peaceably, right? We can only control ourselves. We can't control how another person treats us or acts against us. We cannot control the feelings or actions of another person. What we can control is how we treat others, how we choose to see others, how we choose to feel about others. The Christian lens is to see that person as a human made in God's image, a person who is broken just like us, and a person who has a deep need for love and reconciliation. That's all of us. The healing message of God's self-giving love makes enemies into people who are, it makes friends of people who are enemies. That's the message of the cross, is reconciliation, right? Us to God and us to one another. Even though we're hostile towards each other, the message of the cross can bring us together. So you think living peaceably doesn't mean living aloof, right? Actively making peace is our responsibility. Actively making peace. We have a responsibility to it as far as it depends on us. Actively engaging those people that we feel hostile towards, or that we understand is feeling hostile towards us. We actively reach out, engage them with the love and mercy, that comes from Jesus. And that will look different in each life. Maybe you need to start with a spouse or a parent or a child. Whatever the case is, it depends on you. It's not the other person's responsibility to make the relationship better, so far as it depends on you. We all have a responsibility to make those fractured relationships in our lives better, to live in peace. It's only when we seek the peace of those in our immediate sphere of life that we can kind of tentatively reach out and seek to do more in society. Right? If our own lives are chaotic messes and we refuse to make peace with those around us, how can we seek to try to make peace in the broader social world? It's hypocrisy. So verse 19 through 21 it's really interesting. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. for by doing so you will heap burning coals upon his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Okay, it's not our place to avenge. It's not our responsibility. That's up to God. The whole judgment thing, that's God's job. That's above our pay grade. But we do have kind of an encouragement. What is up to us? If your enemy is hungry, feed him, right? If your enemy is thirsty, give him something to drink, right? And the enemy there, a lot of times we think of it as someone who like wants to kill us. Really, it's just someone who's in a hostile relationship to us. That can be within our own household. Our default setting as humans, again, is to get back at someone who's hurt us or to treat them without honor or cause some sort of pain in their own lives. The radical message of Jesus is to reverse that instinct and to show them love, kindness, and to meet whatever need they might have. And that's our responsibility as Christians. So again, whatever side we've taken on any of these issues, our responsibility is to reach out across the aisle to those that we know disagree with us and show them love and mercy. And I know just within this small chat group, there's probably people from all sorts of different spectrum on all these different issues. Our responsibility is to show each other honor, love, grace, to reach out and to treat them with more honor than they could possibly treat us with. That's our responsibility. Could you imagine how bizarre it would be if like two armies were at war with one another? One army is starving to death, the other army brings in all the food that they need. It's a bizarre scene. It's the exact opposite of what you want to do. You want to starve them out so that you can win the war. It's like this is the exact opposite of what Paul's telling us to do in our personal lives, right? Is to actually give our enemies what they need, right? Give the people that are hostile in our lives what they need. Give them food and drink. Give them whatever needs they might have. As Christians, our war is not with people. I think that's the main point. Our war is not with people. That's not our fight. Our fight is against Satan, against the evil, ideologies and everything else that he presents humans with, that he creates for us to fall into. Our mission is not to defeat other people or to push our social or political agenda upon them. It's to actively make peace with people, to all, he says, to show them the gospel lived out, to present them with the restoring message of Jesus, the healing message of Jesus, the reconciling message of Jesus. It's not by perpetuating the cycle of evil that good will arise. It won't happen. Perpetuating the cycle of evil will never give rise to good. Evil in all of its forms can only be overcome, as he says here, with good. Not perpetuating. When someone says something that you disagree with or that you really can't stand, not to lash out at them. Find a way to return a blessing. Find a way to seek peace in all those circumstances. So my encouragement is for all of us, myself, I'm talking to myself as well, mostly maybe. I know we all have people in our own lives who are on your opposing side of all of these polarizing situations, whatever side that might be. I don't know where everyone here lands or everyone in our congregation lands on any of these things. I know we all have sides though, to some extent. I encourage each one of us to reach out, to demonstrate love and grace and peace. Seek to understand that person, where they're coming from, not to make them flip sides, but to be a presence of peace, to show honor and grace, right? Whatever that means, take them out for a walk or a coffee or whatever. Show them honor, show them humility. The only way through the divide we have in our society is by very real demonstrations of Christ's love, his message of peace, and his mission of helping us to see beyond our own ideologies to a greater reality. It's the only way through it is by living out the love of Christ. Before we kind of move into Lord's Supper, any comments or questions?
Derek, in one of your other recent Bible classes, you mentioned, or the verses were sort of talking about seeing things just in a spiritual light. So this is what we're talking about today, with wanting to be more like Christ in these ways. In all these situations, you know, whether it's a family conflict, a neighbor conflict, or something like this in our society. I like what you said last time, to really think of it in a spiritual sense as, yes, this is the exact details of this situation today, of my circumstances or an event today, but really this is a bigger spiritual thing that's going on. And so my duty in this is not to change that person or whatever, but my spiritual duty here is to pray over the details of these verses, to say, renew in me. And so it's like all of these situations every single day, all these conflicts are just opportunities for us, spiritual opportunities for us to connect with God and to be renewed, and to be a changed person, because really it's never the circumstances. I won't even remember tomorrow's circumstance, but I'll either be changed for it or I'll be more full of hate for it.
Right. Yeah. As far as it depends on you. Yeah. It's our responsibility to be renewed and changed. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's funny. There's also a lot of practical wisdom, like you were saying here, because for one, if your well-being, I guess you might say, depends on getting other people to do things, you tend to be a very unhappy person, right? There's no way to force anybody to do something. So by you being the one to change, then it doesn't matter necessarily what they do, but at least you know that you've done what you can.
Yeah.
In that scenario.
Right. Being God's person in all those circumstances is the best way through. Yeah, it's just the way that'll bring healing and help to ourselves and overflowing to other people.
Well, and I think this is it's funny. It's also really good for almost any situation. I think a lot of religious people, over time learn the secret that is, we talk about, like, letting your emotions control you and that kind of thing. And one of the things you learn when you really start being introspective and also start trying to, do good things, is that your emotions don't always come before your actions. So sometimes you find, for example, is, like with your treating your enemy well, you start to actually feel less of that sort of
animosity.
Yeah, exactly. Towards them. And so this happens a lot in all kinds of areas where your actions actually dictate how you feel, and that helps as you kind of build that habit, that action, it cements it into the way you think.
Yeah, it's really hard to continue to, like, kind of hate somebody that we're praying for their good and that we're consistently blessing. It's really hard to stay mad and to hate someone when we are actively seeking their good. It becomes almost impossible, because then we live like in a what's called cognitive dissonance, where we're not believing in the way that we're living, and we can't do that. So yeah.
The dark flip side to that is, if you treat other people badly, it'll just make it easier for you to continue to go and to think of them as less and less.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the problem with kind of the exclusion aspect. We vilify and dehumanize people that we disagree with, and that makes it impossible for us to come together. Right? If we can't see people for their humanity, being made in the image of God, and all else is secondary, we just can't come together in the middle and actually have a dialogue and have healing. We have to see each other, no matter what side of an argument or a political side we're on. We have to see each other as human and made in God's image and worthy and deserving of our love and our embrace. If we can't do that, there's no healing possible.
The other interesting thing I was thinking of when reading through this is how infused I think this is already in our kind of culture. Like one of the things, for example, when you think of like doctors and nurses and stuff, the ethical considerations are the idea being, I will treat anybody regardless of how, I feel or whatever about their stances, like even if a criminal comes into the ER, you treat them the same as you would any other patient. I mean, even in the military, it's the same way. You're supposed to treat, as a medical person, you're still supposed to treat even enemy combatants, right, with the best of your ability and resources. You're not like holding anything back just because they're the bad guys. So we have this like, and I think it's extra prevalent in like the medical community, but I think there's probably some other places where that's in there, where has influenced our culture, where it's important to treat people that way, to treat people equally regardless of their status or how you feel about them or their ideas personally or things like that.
Right. Yeah. So I think the purpose of this, again, I'm not trying to say, here's what one side of this particular, because there's so many different polarizations happening right now. Here's this side's beliefs, here's this side's beliefs, and here's what we should think. I don't, like I said, I don't know the answers to that. What I do know is my responsibility is to love people and to treat them the way God sees them, regardless of their beliefs and regardless of where they belong on that spectrum. Treat them as people who are made in God's image, deserving of my love and my embrace, and deserving of the message of healing that comes through the gospel. Right? Just because they're human, they are worthy of that. Just in the fact that they're human, they're worthy of my being able to step outside myself, learn from them, sympathize with them, attempt to see things, like he says, don't be arrogant, don't be wise in your own eyes, try to see things from their perspective, because I might be wrong. Right? It's not just to come in like I'm right, I have all the answers. That's not the Christian. It's not the Christian response. Christian response is to be humble and to seek their honor and to seek peace. That's the Christian response here. So with that, I think it would be a good time to listen to another, or if you want to sing along, obviously, sing along to another song. This is Glory and Honor by the A Cappella Company. And after this song, we will have the Lord's Supper.
When I'm there with you in heaven, what a wondrous joy will be. Gather with the angel chorus, standing by the glassy sea. Such a thought is hard to fathom, in the presence of my King, and with countless ones forgiven, gathered round the throne to sing. Glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, we give glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Lord, or approach this awesome thing. You are God, and to your glory we will worship and abide in your presence there forever. We'll be happy to reside. Glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. We have seen His glory. We have seen. We have seen His glory. Oh, we have seen His glory. The one, He's the one and only Son. We have seen His glory. Oh, we have seen His glory. We have seen His glory. Oh, we have seen His glory. Jesus, He's the one and only Son. Glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Glory and honor, worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the Lamb. Worthy is the
There we go. Okay. Now we're going to move the Lord's Supper, and Stephen is going to lead it. He's here. I'm going to step out of the way so I'm socially distanced.
Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to be here, but it sure be nice when we can get back together and have the Lord's Supper all together in one place. That'll be a wonderful day when that happens.
Amen.
I'm just going to read from Mark 14. This is when Christ was with his disciples, and they were having the Passover supper. It says, while they were eating, he took some bread, and after a blessing, he broke it and gave it to them and said, take it, this is my body. Let's have a prayer. Holy Father, thank you so much for your Son that died on the cross for us, that paid a price that we could not pay. And we thank you so much for the bread at this time, and that represents his body. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And after he had taken the cup and given thanks, he gave it to them And they all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Truly I say to you, I will never again drink of it, the fruit of the vine, until that day when I drink it new in the kingdom of God." So let's have a prayer over the cup. Heavenly Father, again, we thank you so much for your Son and for the blood he shed, for forgiveness of our sins, and for those who believe in him. Father God, we just thank you so much for this sacrifice that we could not pay. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. All right.
I'm going to go to Mom's and give it to her.
Awesome. Steve's going to go over to deliver communion to Madge now.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Tell her hi, we love her. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and read a passage, and then we'll close off with a song. Really quickly, though, as far as announcements go, no potluck next week. The second time I've used that. I'm sorry. It's painful, actually. Yeah. So in the Revelation chapter 5. Revelation chapter 5, starting in verse 6. John the apostle has this vision of heaven. And he says, "Between the throne and the four living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and 7 golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. They sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them into a kingdom of priests to our God. They shall reign on the earth." Again, the message of Christ is universal. The need for Christ is universal. There's universal embrace that we are hoping in.